I've ridden more than 75 gravel bikes in recent years, and in this video, I'll give you my top 5 gravel bikes of 2024. Top 5 according to whom or to what? Well, to me, of course, and this year, the criteria is simple. Just the bikes I've had the most fun riding. I had a great season this year. Aside from obliterating my shoulder on a solo road ride back in August, I had a lot of great adventures. I was bike pack racing in Colombia down at the early part of the year. I did some gravel stage racing in Oregon. I rode in the northern part of Taiwan in the pouring rain with David Arthur. And I've been enjoying the spectacular playground that is my backyard here in the Colorado Rockies. If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Ben Delaney. I've been in cycling media for 25 years now. Started as an intern, worked all the way up through roles like editor-in-chief and editorial director at various titles. I was in the specialized global marketing department for a hot minute where I wrote "Aero is everything" and unwittingly released a monster. But in the gravel sphere, I've ridden a lot of the events. I've done the big ones like Unbound Gravel, Steamboat Gravel, the Mid-South, a bunch of the different Belgian waffle rides, and I've done a lot of the smaller ones, which have a much higher fun to stress ratio. Beyond the events, I just love riding drop bar bikes on paved and dirt roads, sometimes by myself, sometimes with group rides. I started the ride here on YouTube 2 years ago. It is funded in a few ways. YouTube advertisements, annual sponsors whom I list in every video description, good folks at places like Silka, Feedback Sports, First Endurance, etc. And sometimes by advertisers such as Buycycle, who is supporting this video. Buycycle is the world's largest used bike marketplace, and Buycycle recently expanded its offerings to include components as well. More on Buycycle later. Here on the ride, I do not take money for reviews. I realize this is YouTube and other channels may operate this way. That's not how I roll. Whether you buy or don't buy any of these top 5 bikes, honestly, I don't care. I'm very much in favor of cycling. I do believe that riding bikes makes you happier and healthier. As to which bike that is, that's entirely up to you. I do hope that this top 5 list can be useful as you're forming opinions of your own, and I do appreciate the commentary and the back and forth in the comments below. With all that as context, let's dig into the top 5. One of these is a bit of a wild card, but I hope you can appreciate the spirit in which it is offered up. If you get impatient, you can use the table of contents below to jump around through each of the 5 bikes. I've ridden a number of gravel bikes this year, including Scarab Paramo, Revolt Rover, Rocky Mountain Solo, the Harrow Buzzard, Time 80 HX45, Canyon Grail, 3T Explorer Race, Conago C68, Saucer Warbird, Checkmate, Checkmate, Specialized Crux, Giant Revolt, Bassa Palto, BMC Urs, and many more. If you widen the frame to the last 2 or 3 years, that list gets a lot deeper. Bikes from Ridden, YT, Lightspeed, Mosaic, Envy, Pinarello, Pivot, Da Vinci, Ridley, Felt, and many more. Within all this, my preferences skew towards the racier side of things. I like a bike that's lighter and livelier versus a burlier, more adventure-y bike. A couple of videos ago, I had James Huang in here. We were talking about suspension on gravel bikes. James rides all sorts of bikes in all sorts of scenarios. He skews a little more towards the burlier, more technical style of riding, and one of his personal bikes, for instance, has a gravel suspension fork on it. I'm a bit more to the other side. Sure, I like playing on a trail or two here and there, but mostly I like riding roads, dirt roads, paved roads. I like a road. So that's just for context as you're considering my picks here. Let's get into the bikes. Number 5, Giant Revolt. My number 1 pick from 2023 carries over to this year. For all the same reasons that I loved it last year, I love it this year. It's a good Goldilocks bike in terms of handling. It's slack enough that it feels confident, but not sloppy or overly heavy on the front wheel. Nice and low, which also feels stable. It's got a great amount of compliance in my mind. This is me emulating the seat post with my hand. The D-shaped seat post has a good amount of flex to it, which, it's not a thud buster, full-on suspension seat post. It's just a carbon post that has flex. That feels good. There's a little bit of flex in the bar, not quite as much. There's room for up to officially 2.1, but folks like Carl Decker can squeeze in 2.2s in there. The rear adjusts so you can have a bigger tire in there and a longer wheelbase, or you can tighten it up and have up to a 45 in the shorter setting. I like the fact that there's a number of different price points. You can certainly spend a lot of money on it, but you don't have to. And that goes for many of the bikes on the list. That there's, the top end bike is, the one that I like to ride across the board, but there's a variety of prices, and Giant is one of the best at offering a great deal there. A couple updates on the bike for this year. There's more internal routing, not entirely internal. There's not a integrated cockpit up front, so you can still travel with the thing, but the lines run into the frame, and it's got the down tube storage, which can be a handy thing, can be a bit more of a nuisance than dig into a saddlebag, but that's something we're seeing on a lot of gravel bikes these days. One thing that carries over that I also appreciate, in addition to the geo and the feel, is the fact that it can be 2x. I like how a 2x feels. The bike I rode this year had a SRAM force group, not the Shimano Di2 2x. In my opinion, if you want 2x, you should go with Shimano. Just works better, in my humble opinion. And if you like 1x, go with SRAM, because you've got a lot more options there. SRAM Force 2x is still a great group, just not up to snuff, in my opinion, with the Di2, which now comes finally in 12 speed as well. Yes, the annoying shim that goes into the frame to hold the seat post in place continues on with the current model. If you travel with your bike a lot, that's something to be aware of. I drop that thing into the frame every single time I take the seat post out, but once you've got the bike assembled, that's not an issue. Next bike, my number 4, as it were, that I rode in 2024, Canyon Grail. Love how the bike feels. A lot of these you'll notice as I go on are similar in geo, with the head tube in the 72 to maybe like 71.5 range. I just think that's the good sweet spot for gravel. Yes, the bike doesn't have clearance for 2.2, so if you're looking for a super fat tire gravel bike, this is not it. But if you like a light and lively gravel bike, I think this one is delicious. Some upgrades, some updates to the latest model include, yes, that internal down tube storage and a pretty slick, in my opinion, snap-on bag. I don't use bags often. Usually when I'm running a bag, it's just for some extra clothing, like if I'm doing a big ride up to the mountains and I want to have a jacket further way down, or snacks. But for most of my riding, I don't have a bag on, so I think this is the best case I've seen thus far of bags that literally snap on and snap off. Not that that's the entire reason to buy a gravel bike, but that's a cool feature. Another thing to be aware of with the Grail is the integrated cockpit. Looks sweet, and if it fits you right out of the gate, fantastic. If it doesn't, you have the option to get the Pro Bar, which is a little bit longer, narrower, and lower. So for me, making that swap made the bike fit perfectly. You can watch my video on that process above. How much adjustability you should have in a bike is subject for debate. Bike fitters will tell you you should be able to adjust every little thing down to the millimeter. Some folks, like I was talking with pro rider Alexei Vermeulen about this, thinks maybe we're getting a little too precious about it, and that if we can just have a more flexible, sturdy body, a millimeter or a centimeter here or there shouldn't make that much of a difference. But for my money, I like having a bike that fits me. So having that Pro Bar got me in the neighborhood. Another thing that doesn't affect me as a tester, but affects all the rest of you, is price, right? The way I test bikes is I will get bikes in for a month to sometimes almost a whole year, and then I send them back. I don't pay for them, but I don't keep them and I don't profit from them. But that's not how bikes work for most of y'all. And Canyon, as a consumer direct brand, definitely has the most price competitive options here. In the US, they recently added some service centers in the form of REI, only a few shops now, but they're adding supposedly all the rest of the REI network rolling into 2025, which is a sticking point, and rightfully so for some folks, that if you want to get a bike worked on and you're not comfortable doing it yourself, especially if you need something like that cockpit swap, there are no Canyon retailers out there the way there are, like a traditional IBD brand, Trek, Specialized, Giant, etc. So just, all part of the balancing game. But as far as how the bike feels, I loved riding the Canyon Grail in 2024. Rode it on the stock wheels and then rode the Bird Sparrow wheels quite a bit. Those wheels, you can check out that video, are some of the most standout wheels I've ridden recently because of their absurdly lightweight. The pair weighs about as much as many rear wheels, thanks, yes, to a very shallow, lightweight carbon rim, but also to the specialized Dyneema spokes. Bird, I was just reading in Bicycle Retailer, the trade magazine, came from the mix of bike and nerd. Bird. I appreciate that. Whether it was with the Bird wheels or stock wheels, I very much enjoyed riding the Canyon Grail as one of my top bikes of 2024. Do you need to sell an old bike or two to make room for a new bike? Or perhaps a new bike is not in the cards for you and a used bike is an option? If so, I suggest you check out Buycycle, the world's largest marketplace for used bikes, which has now expanded its offerings to include components. Buycycle is supporting this video, and I appreciate that. There are 2,600 gravel bikes on Buycycle now. Giant, Trek, Specialized, Cannondale, Conago, Canyon, Pinarello, Scott, Factor, you name it. You can search by brand, bike size, year range, component group, and more. It's free to list your bike for sale with photos and information, and there is an easy template to create your ad. And of course, it's free to browse all the listings. When you sell a bike, Buycycle only takes a 3.5% seller protection fee. Don't have a bike box? No problem. Buycycle will send you a box to your home and will arrange for pickup once you have the thing packed up. Buycycle recently expanded its offerings to include components as well: wheels, forks, whole groups or individual parts, stems, bars, tires, and more. Thanks to Buycycle for supporting this video, and you can use the code THERIDE for 30% off your seller protection fee. Another bike I loved riding this year, the new Trek Checkmate. Trek had the Checkpoint for many years and now has split its gravel lineup into the Checkpoint being the more adventure-y, bigger clearance, more mounts for all the things, adventure bike, and the Checkmate being the svelter, racier, less tire clearance bike. Maxes out 45 for me, that's fine. I love the feel of the bike, right? Whether it's the flexing seat post, Trek calls it the ISO speed decoupler. It feels very similar to the Giant Revolt in that manner. Up front, the top end bike has an integrated cockpit which fits very well. There's a wide variety of fits there. Trek is now building bikes to your specification for a price and delivering them either to your local shop or even to your house. So that's a relatively new change for Trek. Just love how the bike handles. The handlebar is the same as on the Madone, and that there's a bit of a sweep to it, so it's, at least for the medium large that I rode, which is roughly a 56 centimeter bike, 41 at the hoods, down to 44 in the bars. The top end bike comes with SRAM's new Red Explorer group, the 13-speed group, which I think is an excellent group. I love how the hoods feel. Both having a lot of room for your hands, and then the braking is very good. It's miles ahead of where SRAM braking used to be, both in the drops and on hoods. Both this and the Checkpoint have the option for integrated bags. Not quite as svelte and quick and clicky and easy as the Canyon Grail in that you have to thread these on, but it's still, in my opinion, a better option than Velcroing bags on. A lot of frame bags are getting better now, and that it's not just raw Velcro that's grabbing your shorts or your tights, but just visually I think it looks cleaner not to have all that on there. There's a front triangle bag and then a longer frame bag that you can get for this bike. But bags aside, I just like how the bike feels. Not the lightest, but it rides like a light bike, and it's got that nice Goldilocks mix of comfort and quick, snappy acceleration. My number 2 bike of 2024 was an old giant protege. Bear with me on this. This bike I rode after losing a bet with a buddy. I rode it at Steamboat Gravel, and I had a blast on this bike. I had the most fun on this bike at an event than any other bike. This bike was not at all optimized. The thing weighed 40 pounds. There was no adjustments. I set bolt uprights and was fine. So maybe to Alexi's point, we shouldn't be so fussy about geo. But the main thing was the attitude that I went into Steamboat Gravel with, which was just to have a good time. I was not at all fussed about how quickly or slowly I went. No, I would not want to ride this bike every day, but I think the takeaway is we often get very wound up about the particulars of this weight or this measurement or this particular feature. And really, where you are and what you're doing and who you're doing it with is going to make a much bigger impact on how much fun you're having than any one of those particular minute details.
How you doing? I'm doing great. I was just going to pose with this sign because it's got the appropriate messaging here.
Similarly, a few years ago, my wife was working in Ireland, and I went over with the kids and we posted up in her hotel room. I rented a city bike and did some of the ring of carry just in street clothes and tennis shoes, and had a fantastic time on that bike. Had a water bottle from the grocery store in there, and still got to enjoy the benefit of endorphins from pushing up hills. Certainly took the downhills a little bit more cautiously than I would on a more high performance bike, but the thrill and the enjoyment and the fun was in the adventure of the ride and being out there. And I don't think I would have enjoyed the ride any more, or it would have been any more memorable, if it was on a bike that cost 20 times that. As with the giant protege, no, I wouldn't want that to be my daily driver. But the point is, the bike is just a mechanism, it's just a tool, and you can enjoy the ride on just about any bike with the right attitude. Okay, let's wrap this up with a serious bike, so you don't leave this video irritated with a gag bike as the last taste in your mouth. The bike I went for after 2 months or so off of riding was the Specialized Crux, for a couple of reasons. One, I was interested in having a cushy ride, and this bike from the SRAM launch has big fat 45 mil Goodyear tires on these crazy wide zip rims that I have inflated to Zip's suggested pressure of 26 and 27 PSI front and back, and being very delicate and in pain, I thought a cushy ride would be a good ride. Another reason I grabbed this bike is because this was probably the most fun bike in my mind when I thought back to what I had ridden over the course of the year, and the lightness and the snappiness and the comfort that are all baked into the Crux are reasons for that. This, as you would imagine coming from the SRAM launch, has the SRAM Red Explorer 13-speed group on there, and the same attributes that I was just talking about from the Trek of having plenty of room for the hands, a ton of powerful braking. I love the fact that there are buttons that can control your Garmin or your Wahoo or your Hammerhead. The wheels on this bike are not what you would get from Specialized. The top end Red Explorer Access bike has the Specialized Revolt Rapid 2 wheels, which are probably even lighter. I think the claim build is something like 15 pounds and change for 56, and that's about where this bike is with zip wheels and cockpit instead of the Revolt pieces. But similar neck of the woods. Speaking of the cockpit, I love how the bar not only feels on the tops. We're seeing a lot of bars that have a wider top that Some brands claim as aero, and they can be, but I like it because it just disperses the pressure across the palms more so than a very skinny bar. That's something that I'm noticing increasingly in my delicate phase of life right now, is that skinny little bars just aren't as comfy as wide bars. So there's that, plus the shape taper goes all the way up to the back of the hoods. So that's a new thing for me. I haven't seen any other bar maker develop this particular shape. So that just all adds up to extra comfiness and security and control in the hands. There is zero aero consideration. There's no down tube storage. The hoses run not entirely externally, but certainly aren't, tucked into the cockpit. There's no integrated cockpit, just a standard bar and stem. SRAM's new 13-speed group has a 1046 cassette. You can have any cassette configuration you like, as long as it's that one. And then you adjust for your personal preference, terrain, fitness with the chain ring, and then a chain that is cut exactly for that chain ring. This one's got a 40, which I have previously found to be a little small. Not so much for riding on the flats or certainly going up, but a lot of the riding I do here is coming down long winding mountains, and it's pretty easy to spin out that 40-10. But coming back from being smashed up, I've definitely appreciated having the 40-46 as the low gear, especially like the first couple rides I couldn't stand up out of the saddle, so just being able to grind away on a tiny little gear was welcome. So right on the heels of my any bike is a good bike, and a cheap bike and an old bike can be a great bike, I have to say riding a super light, comfortable, agile bike like the Specialized Crux is a joy on its own. And that was my top gravel bike of 2024. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, please subscribe and please tell your friends. I appreciate the support. It's gonna be a little while before I get back to some real burly gravel riding. Still a fair amount of rehab to go on the shoulder, but I'm grateful I can get out and do some easy rides outside and ride inside here on Zwift. It's a crazy world out there, and I appreciate the endorphins I can get from riding a bike and the sense of community I can get from talking with fellow bike nerds like yourself. All that helps me to enjoy the ride, and I hope the same is true for you. Till next time.